Imagine you're a landlord, and for the past 15 years, you've had one of the best tenants ever. Paid his rent on time every single month, never caused a moment's trouble. In fact, you hadn't really seen him for years. One day, 1964 in Washington, D.C., your tenant dies of stomach cancer. You don't know he's gone, and for a couple of months, you're not receiving any rent checks. So you go to check on him, check on the building. You open up the small garage that he's been renting from you to see if there's anything valuable that can cover 2 months past rent. Maybe some things that need to go to his family. When you open the door, a dazzling light shines out of the garage, a sparkling light into your eyes. Inside you find one of the largest and most spectacular works of art you've ever seen. That's exactly what happened in 1964 when James Hampton's landlord opened the garage he had been renting for 15 years. James Hampton was a young African-American soldier, born to a gospel preacher and singer, who joined the army in World War II as a carpenter, come back and got a job as the night janitor at the General Services Administration. And every night, for 15 years, he would go home alone and build this. This piece of art is what his landlord saw when he opened the garage. And to scale, it's about as big as the chancel. The name of this piece of art is, and I'll get it wrong probably, The Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennium General Assembly. The Throne of the Third Heaven of the Nation's Millennium General Assembly. And it is a throne for Jesus. In fact, for the second coming of Jesus. Because when he was a young man, James Hampton started to hear a voice, which he understood to be the voice of God, which let him know that he was about to embark on a journey much like Noah's in that story of the ark. He was told that his job was to prepare the throne for Jesus' return to earth. So every night, in secret, he would leave his job as the night janitor of the General Services Administration and come home with things out of the trash. Broken light bulbs, electrical conduits and wire, paper, tape, pieces of tables and wood, and a heck of a lot of aluminum foil, which is what is that glimmering surface on the side of this. If you want to see this, you can go to the first floor of the folk art exhibit in the Smithsonian, which is where it ended up. What you can't see in this picture is that there's a little bar at the top of the middle piece of the throne, right at the top, and on the top it says the words, "Fear not," which were the message he said God delivered to him. It has a lectern and a pulpit and an altar and intricate detail crafted for 12 hours a night for 15 years. He was a humble person and didn't tell a lot of people that he was, in his understanding, chosen by God to do this. But he did start referring to himself by the end of his life by St. James. And he's left notebooks filled with a language that scholars who study him and this work haven't yet deciphered completely. But he did give himself a title, Director of Special Projects for Eternity. That's either the greatest job in the world or the worst. And it would be easy, much like the parent in the poem that Beth read to us this morning, it would be easy for me to approach a work of art and devotion like this with some air of cynicism about me. Something was wrong with him. I wouldn't wish this project on any of you, or to hear those voices, or to believe that you were chosen like that. But I have to say, look what is possible when a single human being prepares the way for the person they love most in the entire world. Look what love directed at another person can create. Anyone ever built a chair like that for you? I don't know what would make you spend every night in secret after work, scraps of paper and foil and broken light bulbs, creating a devotional piece of art. Who do you love so much that that's what you would build for them? Honestly, I don't think I could pay attention to anything for 15 years. I have trouble for 15 minutes. When I meditate, in my meditation practice, I breathe in and count to 1 and breathe out and count to 2, and I hardly ever make it past 6. I've been doing it for years. I don't think I could pay attention to anything for 15 years. And because you nodded at me when I said that, it makes me believe that that's the case for you too. And it is provable that our capacity to pay attention, to attend to things and people is less than it used to be. Brain scans of average Americans have shown that we now share the average attention span of a goldfish. 8 seconds. 8 seconds. There's a man named Matthew Crawford who wrote a terrific book that one of our members gave me, and it's called The World Beyond Your Head, as if such a thing exists. It's called The World Beyond Your Head, and it's a philosophy book about attention. In the book, he says that we had agricultural economies, that we've had industrial economies, that we moved into information economies, and now his major claim is that we are in a time of attention economy. When the most prized possession anybody has is the ability to focus what's happening inside their head, and therefore, the thing that people want from us is that focus, that attention, both in our personal relationships, but also to buy and sell things. He gives the example of what it's like to live in the modern world as that of sitting in the airport lounge at the Charles de Gaulle Airport. He says that's what life is like. He walks in and his boarding pass now has an ad on the back of it. And then when he gets on the moving stairway or the moving path that takes him to his next gate, it has an ad on it. And there's an announcement coming overhead that somebody's late or has lost a bag or the flight's getting in at this gate. And then when you sit down, the chairs have ads on them, and the place where you plug in your phone has an ad on it. And there's another announcement about how late the plane is running or where you're supposed to be. And CNN is blaring on the TV about things that you don't really want to pay attention to right now. Except for if you're rich. Because if you're rich, you can afford to buy a space where those things don't happen. That the wealthy among us can buy silence. We can buy rooms and spaces that aren't overly or overtly branded. We can pay people to make our children pay attention enough to prep for the SATs. That wealth and power can divert attention both for yourself and for other people. And he says that's a problem. Because if only the wealthy truly have access to space, to a time in their lives where somebody isn't getting their attention over and over and over and over, then perhaps they're the only people in our culture who have the ability to think creatively, make decisions about what is important in their life, have a coherent sense of identity, and decide who and what they will love. He says our very identity is at stake in this economy. And that rings true for me. Because we can't get through a staff meeting here at church without hearing a phone go off. It's never intentional, but it happens. Somebody getting texted, beeps, the emails coming in at 100 or more a day, the ads over the radio. By the time I even get here, I'm tired with attention. And in the last service, in a magical moment, somebody's phone went off right now. It was perfect. I was praying it would happen again. But it proved a fact. If I can't stop, if I'm not given a space that's unbranded and quiet, I may not even know who I am or what or who I love. I saw that kind of attention, that loving attention toward another person, take the form of prayer a couple of weeks ago. Every Thursday I go to Spanish class, and I had a couple of minutes extra. I had about an hour extra beforehand, and so ministers are the nerdiest people on earth, and so I decided that while I was waiting for that, I would read a book about the theory of worship and prayer. So I'm sitting getting a cup of coffee on Lower Greenville, with my book open, reading about theories of how a minister and leaders can engage congregations in effective and meaningful embodied prayer experiences. And while I had my nose stuck in that theoretical book, I failed to notice that two women 3.5 feet from me had been praying for one another for about 20 minutes. I had, let's call it a voice. Maybe not like James Hampton's, but a symbolic tap on the shoulder. I had an embodied sensation that said, hey, look over there for a minute. When I did, I saw that these two young women, probably in their early 20s, maybe college-aged, had been bent over a table holding one another's hands, and they'd been doing it the whole time I was there, but I didn't realize they were praying for one another. And it was obvious that one of the women who was praying for her friend was praying for her because she had been hurt, and because she had been hurt by a man. She used words like, please make his actions not so violent. Please make his words not sting her soul in the way that they have. Please. Over and over, she had this real poetry to how she prayed for her friend. It was obvious she knew how to pray out loud. And then she started calling her friend your child. Help your child. Protect your child. Make your child safe from his words and his actions. It became clear to me that she wanted the all-loving, infinite source of all creation itself to focus on her friend. I assumed her theology was different than mine. But what I watched was a person who knew very well how to attend to someone in a loving way, someone outside her own head. I knew someone who believed that it was worthwhile. She believed that the all-loving, infinite source of all things would pay attention and love her friend. That's amazing. And that, being loved in that relationship, she loved her friend, she loved her God loved her friend, affected her whole sense of identity. Your child, she kept saying. Our Universalist ancestors believed that actually your humanity was defined by God loving you, that changed everything. But I think for me, the key I saw in her and in James Hampton's work is that it matters that you love somebody, someone, not just something. I think it's great to love justice, but it's even better to love justice because you love people and you want justice for them. The philosopher Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian and philosopher, talked about what he called I-thou relationships. Okay, many of you already know Martin Buber. That's great. He talked about I-thou relationships. What he said is we're predisposed in our human societies to have I-it relationships. I love things, or I treat people like things, who are there to be used, to fill my needs, etc. He said that the biggest shift we can ever make in our life is to enter into I-thou relationships. Not I-you, but I-thou. I look upon you and attend to you and your value with a sense of reverence. For Martin Buber, the biggest thou was God. But people could be thou too. And I think something does change when we practice a life that has a thou at the other end of our love. I think that's why when people asked the teacher Jesus, what's Judaism all about? He answered in 2 sentences, love God and love people. His whole summary of the whole project of being a person of faith was an ethic of love directed at another person. I know a lot of people who work for justice. I run in a lot of circles that do social activism. I know people who love peace and don't really seem to love people. A lot of people who love justice and don't seem to like people very much, or at least their actions don't show they do. It makes a huge difference. Not that you learn to love an abstract concept. That's why I struggle, like the poet, with evolution loves you. I believe it, but it takes some explanation. It's why my wife and I had the exact same reaction that the poet did when our child came home from his preschool jumping for Jesus, singing songs of hallelujah and praise to the Lord. We had the same problems, but I cannot tell him Jesus doesn't love you. You can't teach disbelief to a child. Only great stories. Also, I guess I could tell him evolution loves you, but it just doesn't ring as true. We have books we read about the Big Bang. And I could, I guess, say to an adult, I don't know if the universe was created just for you, but it was created perfectly so that you could exist. If the tilt of the earth were off by the slightest bit, if the cooling of the universe milliseconds after the Big Bang had not happened just as it was, you would not exist. Maybe the universe isn't for you, but it's just right for you. You're not an alien in your body. You're not an alien on this planet. You're not born into a sinful existence. You are at home in this body and in this world. You are innately good and a creature of this good green earth. Maybe evolution does love you. But that's a longer sentence and a hard one to keep in your hip pocket. It makes sense to me that most religions think about the direct object of people's love as a person, because our most important relationships are usually with people. Why not the most important of the most important relationships? Whatever the case, your life will change the minute you start practicing adding more thous into your life. When we say that love is the doctrine of our church, we don't mean it in some kind of sappy, superficial way that doesn't acknowledge the realities of the world. What we mean is that if you acknowledge that a person in this room deserves love, not abstract love, your love, you can't live the same. And the more people you add into that equation, the more your life has to change. Because real people make real demands. Real people are hurt. Real people are courageous and odd and strange and lovely. A real object, a real person at the other side of that relationship changes everything. I asked myself this week, what would make me spend 15 years toiling away in secret to build a place like that? My family came up high on the list. At my best, that's how I react with them, and I'm not always at my best. But on my short list was you. I realized that for almost 7 years, I've been doing just that. Hiding away in rooms with people, planning things so that this place could do well, and joining with people who are doing exactly the same thing, and most of them don't get paid to do it. I realized that entering into a relationship where I love you and being loved by this congregation has been one of the most profoundly transformative experiences I think I will ever have. Loving you, having the chance to be loved by you in return, has made me a different person. The good news is that it's not just for me or any of the other ministers or the staff or volunteers. That's entirely the project we're about here. Our church exists so that human beings will have direct encounters with love and justice. And we engage in worship so that we can practice knowing what and who is worthy of the love of our lives. That word worship trips people up sometimes. They think that it's a lowly person who doesn't have value on their knees in the midst of a vast and important God, and that's not really what it is at all. It comes from the Old English word worth-shippen. Worth-ship, to give worth to something. We come together week after week to practice being outside of the barrage of stimulus, to be outside of a million people's messages about how much we should love money or sex or power or the color of someone's skin or the way things are. This whole endeavor is meant to come in and say for a different moment, what is worthy of the attention, service, and love of the one life you likely have? That's what worship is. My hope is that by being a part of this community, you add more and more thous to the other end of that relationship. More and more real human beings, not abstract human beings. That you grow to love justice and peace and truth, yes. But you grow to love people that call you to be peaceful, truthful, and just. Your life will change for the better if you find more human beings to love. May it be so for you and all of us. And amen.